Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is the second episode of Music Theory for the Guitar by Peter Lamby. That's my name, Peter Lamby. And I'm making these series of videos because I wanted to give to people everything that it took me years in universities and colleges and thousands of dollars learning about music and music theory. But I wanted to give it to you essentially for free and in a series of videos that would be about 12 episodes long. So this is the second episode, second video. And if you watched the first one, you know that we talked about a few things. We talked about intervals. We talked about the 448 pitch, which is the pitch that orchestras tune up to. You know, there might be 50 pieces in an orchestra. The first violinist, he gets out his tuning fork and he tunes to a perfect 448. And then you have the violas and the cellos and the basses, and really the entire orchestra tunes to that single note that the first violin got. And so that's how we tuned our guitars like concert guitarists. And what we used was prime intervals that were generated or generating harmonics. And we said, for example, if we hovered our finger over the fifth fret of the A string, we would come up with the double octave of the A pitch. And then we took that note and we tuned it to our tuning fork. And then we went ahead and we tuned our guitar, starting with that pitch. We went up and down the guitar so that all six strings were tuned essentially to that pitch. And we learned how to tune our guitars in that method as opposed to what you're probably used to, which is something like this. Okay, instead of using that, we used harmonics, right? And what is that? That is the double A of the A note. And what is the seventh fret on the D string? That also is the double octave of the A note. So we have prime octaves tuning to one another. And it's really a better method to use tuning your guitar if you're working with an acoustic guitar. We mentioned in the first video, electric guitars are built a little differently. They sound a little different, and it might be better to tune those guitars to an open chord. So, we talked about that. We talked about parts of the guitar. Then we tuned our guitar using this method of prime octaves and harmonics. And if you didn't see the first episode of the first video, I would suggest you go back and watch it because, like anything else, we're going to build one on top of the other. We're going to start in the beginning and move forward. And in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to talk about intervals, and then we're going to go to triads. Triads are 3 notes. Intervals are 2 notes. Triads 3 notes. Triads are chords. They're 3 notes built on thirds. We're going to go through that. And then we're going to talk about keys, key signatures, time signatures, and we'll probably get into the beginning of scales before the end of the video. So let's start with intervals. Okay. Now, let me get situated here, and I'll get my trusty whiteboard, and we're going to begin talking about intervals. There are 2 kinds of intervals. You have perfect and diatonic. Each one of these kinds of intervals have properties. And we're going to go over some of those properties. But some things, as we said, it's better to commit to memory, because when you're talking about basic facts, it's good to have them at your fingertips. Commit to memory. It makes things a whole lot easier. Kind of like knowing your times tables in math. If I say what's 7 times 7, that's 49. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to add 7 times. You know, 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times 6 is 42, because you know your timetables. Okay, so we have perfect intervals. Those consist of primes, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Okay, this is octaves. All right. Those are the perfect intervals. Remember, we only have 8 notes in an octave of any key, right? C to C is 8 notes. So if you're looking at the piano keyboard, imagine the keyboard. If you go C to C, you hit 8 notes. Now, those are perfect intervals. We have primes, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Now, seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths are what's called diatonic, or you could call them diatonic to the key. And each one of those types of intervals have properties. We went over the important property of the perfect interval, that when you hear that interval fly through the air, they fly in parallel and they never collide. I'm talking about the waves that are flying through the air. They never intersect. If they intersect, then a few things are going on, and one of those things is, if you're tuning your guitar, you're not in tune. You want to get rid of any intersections of the waves. Those are called nodes. Remember, we said you can hear a note, it sounds like wah, 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 and you can feel a note. You can feel it by simply touching the bridge of your guitar. It feels like a bump. When you get closer in tune, the wah-wahs disappear. They slow down. They start out wah, wah, wah. Then they go wah, wah. And finally, they disappear completely. That's how you know you're in tune. Diatonic intervals The most important thing about them is they have a sweet sound. They're sweet, particularly the major diatonic intervals, okay? They have a uh, sweet sound. They're like a sunny day. Okay, they have a bright sound. Um, unlike a perfect interval, which is the basis of a cadence, it has a very powerful, forceful sound. It really is not a sweet sound. It becomes a sweet sound when you add the major third to it, or the major sixth to it, or the major seventh. Any of these diatonic intervals mixed in with the triad, the chord, will create a certain kind of sound. And this is very important for ear training. You want to train your ears when you're studying music. Very important. Major chords, sweet, bright, a sunny day. Okay. Minor chords, darker, somber, serious. Um, Major seventh chords, again, very bright, but a different kind of sound than made by a minor seventh chord. We're going to get into all of that, and you're going to understand it pretty well by the time I'm through, because we're going to start with the 5 tonalities of a chord. And what are the 5 tonalities of a chord? They are major, minor, augmented, diminished, and the dominant 5/7 chord. Okay? The dominant 5/7 chord is the most profound or significant chord in a key of music because it defines the key, okay, that you're playing in. How does it do that? We're going to go through all of that, but we don't want to jump too far ahead. Okay. Now, what we like to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about what intervals look like on a staff of music. Okay. So, let's do that. Let's talk about staffs. You want to know, even though a lot of great players of instruments cannot read music, cannot write music, they play by ear. Some of the best musicians simply play by ear. It's still good to know the basics, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a staff of music. I'm going to show that to you. Okay, a staff of music is simply 5 lines. Okay. A treble staff is also called the G staff. And that's really what guitar players use, okay? As opposed to piano players use something called a grand staff. And what is the grand staff? It's a staff that includes the bass staff or the F staff, and you say it when you say the F clef. Okay, so let's look at that first. This is a treble Uh, this is a grand staff, okay? So on top, you see the G clef? We know it's a G clef because it's drawn from the bar, it comes down, circles around, and this little part here, this circles around the G string. So that's a G clef. This little symbol here is a clef. This is a clef too. This is called the F clef. How do we know it's the F clef? Because you see how this thing turns around like this? And it turns around, it's centered around the F line on the bass clef. So treble clef, bass clef. Together, the grand staff. Okay, and tying that together is a single leisure line, and that line is the line C. So, you see that? See how that's tied together? This is what piano players use. But guitar players basically use the treble staff with chord patterns above. Okay? And it'll say, for example, D, G, A, right? And a lot of times when you buy a piece of sheet music for guitar, it'll give you the fingering pattern in a little box up here. Okay. So that's, you can use that, but you should know how to make the chords that they're calling out. All right. And we have this here. This again is the treble staff tied together by the single leisure line, which is the C line, and that ties into the bass staff, which has the F clef. See that? This is a G clef, that's the F clef. Now, how do we know all that? Well, let's just look at it. We got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. That's the lines of the musical staff that you're dealing with there. See, it starts at D, work your way up. The next space is starts with C, work your way up. The next space is D, then E, space F, line G, space A, and all of this is very easily remembered by simply saying for the lines, yeah, I'm running out of space, every good boy does fine. Okay? See that? We're starting with the E now on the bottom line. And we're going, every good boy does fine. Right? So that's E, G, B, D, F. See that? Every good boy does fine. That's the lines. For the spaces, you can just use the word face. Okay? And that's the spaces in the treble staff. Now, we're not going to concern ourselves with the bass staff because the guitar is not really suited for it. Okay, the guitar is suited for the treble staff, which you're going to see, you're going to know it, you're going to see the little, rather the G clef, and the guitar is suited really to play in only a number of keys. Okay, those keys are C, G, D, A, E. 5 keys. Not even B, although you could say B, but really, when you get to B, the 5 chord of the B is F sharp. F sharp's a very uncomfortable position on the guitar because it's 2 frets from the back. It's called the second position, and it's simply very uncomfortable to play in F sharp, which B has as its 5 chord F sharp. Okay, so we don't really like that. But you take the key of G. G has 1 sharp. That's F. G is playing in the 3rd position on the guitar. Why is that a good key for the guitar? Well, you've got G, which if you just played the open strings on the guitar, you would put your 3rd finger on the G string on the low E, right? And then you had the open D, the open G, the open B, and you're not even doing any work. You're not pressing those strings, any frets on those strings, and you've got a G chord. So that's a very good chord to play the guitar with because you've got all those open strings to work with, and that really helps because a big part of playing the guitar is using something called double stops. And what double stops are, they're using open strings to use the natural tuning of the guitar to play melody, okay, which I'm going to show you how to do that, okay, and how easy it is to use double stops to fill in your guitar playing so that, for example, let's say you're in the key of E, all right? Well, when you go to the 4 chord, which is A, you could just strum A for 4 beats. If there's 4 beats in a measure, maybe there's 8 beats to a measure. So you strum the A chord 8 times, but that's not so good. It's not sounding so good. It's kind of boring. But using double stops, you can simply run your hand up and down the neck, and you use the open strings to play different notes as you move up and down the neck, and it's much more interesting. It's a much better way to play the guitar. All right, so we're going to go through all of that. Now, let's talk again about intervals, okay? We're still on intervals. Okay, here we go. All righty. Now, for the purpose of this, I'm going to use half notes. Okay, you know what notes are. Notes are like this, very simple, very easy. This is a quarter note, right? Got the filled in thing here, filled in circle with a line going up, right? If you're in the time signature 4/4, what does that mean? That means that in this piece of music, here's your staff, these perpendicular lines are called bars. Okay, this guy's a bar. This guy's a bar, right? Between the two bars, you have a measure, okay? That's between the two bars. So if you're in 4/4, this measure is going to could have 4 quarter notes, okay? So what does that mean? Well, it simply means that if you have 4 quarter notes and they're the notes C, well, it would be C, 2, 3, 4, right? That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I have half notes look like this. They're hollow circles with a bar. So if I'm using the note C, this would be C, 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 2, C, 4. See how that works? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Very easy. The last note we're going to talk about for this discussion is the whole note. Now, the whole note is simply a circle. Okay, that's a whole note. So, what do you have? You have quarter note, half note, whole note. What is a whole note? Well, that one single note takes up the whole measure. It's 4 beats. So this would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That C would be carried for 4 beats. Quarter note 1 beat, half note 2 beats, whole note 4 beats. Now, this kind of stuff can drive you crazy because you've got dotted notes, which a dotted note is the length of the note plus half the length of the note. Okay. You've got ties like this. If I put a tie up here, right? See, I put a tie between the two half notes. Well, that turns it into a whole note because it's saying hit the first C, but hold it for another 2 beats. So it's the same thing as 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've also got rests. Rests look like this. This is a rest. And what is a rest? That's when you play nothing. And so you could have a piece of music where the composer wanted you to actually play it like this. Okay? So how would you play that? Well, that would be very easy. It's 1, 2, 3. Nothing for the last beat. It's a rest. Don't want to hear any sound. Okay? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. See, this kind of thing drives you crazy. But in classical music, where their whole point is to keep the piece of music alive for years, decades, and centuries to come, these very studied intellectual musicians write all this out, and it gets very, very difficult. You have to be someone who studies music full time, dedicate your life to it in order to read some of this music on the fly. Okay, now, um, basically, that's the equivalent of what we're going to talk about for the purposes of this discussion uh, today. Okay, although when we go into time signatures, we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right. Now, let's say I have, let's say I have a staff. Okay. Here's my staff. It's 5 lines. All right. It starts here, and it's a treble staff. So I draw a G clef, right? And I circle my little clef around the G string. Okay. And let's say that uh, let's say that I have a note. And let's say that note is G. So I'm going to say, I'm going to put a half note here on G, right? But I'm also going to play, excuse me, wrote that wrong. I have it on G. I'm also going to play G and C. See that? Remember? Every good boy does fine. I got the first note on G. F-A-C-E spells face. The third note is on C. See that? Very easy. Okay. Well, what is that interval? Well, it's very easy. To get an interval, all you do is count. You say G, A, B, C. C, 4. 4. G to C is a fourth. It's a perfect fourth because a fourth is a perfect interval if it's in tune. Okay. Now, I would say that that's pretty straightforward. Now, G to C is a fourth. What is G to D? G to D. Well, we're starting here, okay? But instead of C, we're going to write our next note a step up, which is going to be the note D. See that? Now I'm on D. Now, what do I have? Well, here I had a fourth, a perfect fourth, and here I have a perfect fifth. And how do I know that? Because to get intervals, all you do is count on your fingers. G, A, B, C, D. D, 5, D is a fifth. Very simple, okay? But there's a little bit more to it. Because with perfect intervals, they can either be perfect or they can be augmented or diminished. That simply means that instead of reading the music like this has a little flat sign here, then this interval from G to D becomes a diminished fifth. Following me? Very simple. A diminished fifth is a perfect fifth, except it's collapsed by a half step. Now you can't write it as G sharp to D, even though that too is a diminished interval, because that's a different nomenclature. To have a diminished fifth in the key of G, which this would be the first note in the key of G. See G here? Every good boy. G's right here. Then we count 5. We come to D. Well, that's a fifth. But if it's D flat, we have a diminished fifth. Okay? Now, what if instead of a D flat, we have a D sharp? Okay, well then, we have a fifth, but it's an augmented fifth. Augmented fifth. Okay? And this is the world of intervals. This stuff's very important when you get to chords, okay? Which I'm not going to go into now. I'm going to wait till I get to chords because otherwise it's going to confuse you a little bit. But I'm going to explain to you how the dominant 5/7 chord, which in the key of C would be G7, it contains a diminished fifth. And what is a diminished fifth? Well, it is the also known as a tritone. And it is the most dissonant sound in music. Okay? And what do we know about the way our brains work? We know that because of how we've developed over the centuries listening to music in the Western world, the way they think in the Far East, Japan, and so forth, it's a little different than how people think in the West. But in the Western world, you want your inbred, your genes want to take any dissonant sound and move it towards consonants. Dissonance you can think of as pain to your ears. Consonance is the relief of pain. Okay, so this is very theoretical, it's very philosophical, but it's very important because it's the basis of all Western music. And how do we represent this? Well, it's by using what's called the dominant 5/7 chord and how it resolves to the tonic. Or to say that another way, it's the 5/7 chord to the 1 chord. Okay, this action in music is called a cadence, and it is the most fundamental sound in all the music you listen to, although you may not be aware of it because no one ever told you and you never thought about it. But it's important to understand the things that we're trying to do. We want to participate in music. We want to write music. We want to read music. We want to listen to music. We want to take a song and deconstruct it so we can figure out the chords and the melody. We want to write a song. We have to write a melody and surround that melody with chords. And if the two come together in the right way, we can have, uh, I guess, a work of art. Kind of like if you painted a fine painting or you made a sculpture, you wrote a song. Now, once again, there are some things that you want to commit to memory, okay? And one of those things is the properties of the intervals in music. Intervals are two notes. They can be the notes played at the same time, in which case they're called harmony, or they can be notes that are played along a vertical line, and that's called melody. Either way, those two notes are an interval. Okay, so once again, we're going to say it. We're going to repeat ourselves. In music intervals, you have two kinds. One are perfect and one are diatonic. Perfect intervals are primes, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Okay? Diatonic intervals are seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. There's only 8 notes in any scale of music, regardless of where you start on the piano. Okay, you can start on the C key and you will play only white notes, meaning it has no sharps and flats. You play C to C, and you get the C major chord, the C major scale. You could also play the C sharp chord. How many sharps are in the key of C sharp? I don't really know. Some people say there's 5 with 2 double sharps, or there's 7 sharps. But it doesn't matter because it's absurd to play a piece of music in the key of C sharp. It's absurd to write it, and it's absurd to play it, to read it and play it. Why? Because you could simply take that piece of music and shove it down 1/2 step, and you would go from a key that has 7 sharps to a key that has no sharps, meaning you would go to a key that has 7 black keys on the piano to a key that has no black keys in the piece of music. So why would you do it? You wouldn't do it. The only reason you would do it is because you wanted to have a practice piece for a piano major in a school. That's the only reason. Anybody would either write a piece of music in C sharp or play a piece of music in C sharp. So, again, we said the guitar was suited for 5 keys. What were those keys? They're C, G, D, A, E. 5 keys. All right. Horns are generally flatted instruments that read flatted keys. For example, a lot of basic music written for a horn, such as a trumpet, okay, is written in the key of B flat. Excuse me, the key of F. Why is that? Because the key of F has one flat, and that is B flat. So horns are really designed for flatted keys. But the guitar is not. The guitar is designed for sharp keys. If you notice, all the keys I listed, C, G, D, A, B, they only have sharps. Remember now, there's no flats in a sharp key, and there's no sharps in a flatted key. Okay? If someone comes up to you and they say, well, how many sharps are in the key of F? Well, you would say none because F is a flatted key. Okay? So this is all explained on something called the cycle of fifths, which we are going to go over in detail, but not too much, because really the cycle of fifths is a mechanism that you can use to transpose music. It really doesn't have another purpose. It's uh, people talk about it a lot, music teachers and so forth. We're going to go over it and see how it works, but we're not going to spend too much time on it because it's really not all that important. Um, so, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a little break and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about diatonic intervals. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the second part of episode 2. This is Music Theory for the Guitar by Peter Lamby. That's me. I'm Peter Lamby. And we're going to talk now about diatonic intervals. We've already talked about perfect intervals. We've said that perfect intervals can be primes, fourths, fifths, and octaves. And those intervals are either perfect, augmented, or diminished. Now, we're going to talk about the other intervals, and those intervals are called diatonic or diatonic to the key. Diatonic intervals are seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. Now, it's good just to commit this kind of thing to memory. It makes things a lot easier. Once again, perfect intervals are primes, fourths, fifths, and octaves. Diatonic intervals are second, thirds, sixth, and sevenths. Now, let's take one of those intervals. Let's take a third. We could use seconds, sixths, sevenths, but for purposes of examples, right now we're going to focus on thirds. Now, if you have a note, let's say that note is G. Well, what is the third of G? Well, that's very easy. All you do is count on your fingers. So you have G, A, B. B is 3, B is the third. And because there's two things to remember when you're figuring out intervals or you're calculating intervals. There's two things to remember. The first is that whatever note you start on, that's the key you're in. Okay? In other words, if we start on G, as we did, We're in the key of G. How many sharps are in the key of G? One sharp, that's F sharp. However, we're not dealing with F sharp. We have two notes, G and B. Those notes are natural on the keyboard. The second important thing to remember about intervals is that you always start on the note you're on. In other words, if I said, well, what's the interval between G and C? You do not go D, E, F. Okay, that's three. No, you start on the note you start on. So we're starting on the note G. So G to C, we would go G, A, B, C. C is the fourth. The interval between G and C is a perfect fourth because in the key of G, C is a natural note. There is only one sharp in the key of G, and that's F sharp. So let's take a moment to write some of this out, okay? And this way we'll have a little better understanding of what we're talking about. Okay, so let me get my whiteboard, okay? Get myself situated here. Alrighty, so here we go. I'm gonna write this out. We have diatonic intervals. Alright, and those are seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. Okay? Very easy. See how that works? The diatonic intervals in a scale of music are seconds, thirds, sixths, and sevenths. Okay, so let's take a look at that on the staff. So I'm going to write a staff here, and it's very easy to do. All you do is you write 5 lines. Okay. All right, and you have a bar. You have a clef. Okay, and in the case of the treble staff, we have a G clef. Okay, and we're in the key of G. Okay, that means that we want to put a sharp on the F line, which tells us that every time we play the note F, we don't play F, we play F sharp. Now we have the lines on the staff, and that is bottom to top now. E, G, B, D, F. You see that? Very easy. We memorize that by saying it's every good boy does fine. Okay? Every good boy does fine. The spaces on the staff are going bottom to top now. F, A, C, E. See that? F, A, C, E. We memorize that because it's the word face. Okay? So the lines, every good boy does fine. E, G, B, D, F. The spaces spell the word face. The spaces on the staff are FACE, going bottom to top. We're looking at a treble clef right now. How do we know it's a treble clef? Because we can see the G clef, that little squiggly thing on the side there, that's called a clef. You see how it winds its way down and around. It's circling around the G string. Okay? Very, very simple, very rudimentary, and we're just going over some basics. If you ever took music in school or anything like that, this may all come back to you. Very, very basic. Under the treble staff, we have the bass staff. Okay? And the bass staff, we know it's the bass staff because it has the bass clef, and that's called the F clef. And the F clef looks like this. See that? Here's the F clef, here's the G clef, and together these two staffs make the grand staff, and that's what piano players play to. Guitar players, however, do not play to the grand staff. They play only to the treble the treble staff, right on top here. Now, in the middle of these two staffs, we have something called a ledger line. And that ledger line is essentially middle C on your piano keyboard. See the middle C note? See the ledger line? That ties together the treble staff and the bass staff. Okay? So, these are rudimentary things that are good to know when we are trying to learn music theory. We need to know these things. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to write out some intervals. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to work only with the treble staff because we're not really interested in the bass staff. Okay, there's really no need to go into it. It would simply be redundant. So we're going to work with the treble staff, and we're going to write out some intervals. Okay, so this is going to be a lot of fun and very informative. Let's say I have the note G. So I'm going to write the note G. Now, before I do, I want to tell you, in case you don't know, although you probably do, okay, we have essentially three notes we're going to be working with, although there are many more. One is the quarter note, one is the half note, and one is the whole note. Okay, we're in 4/4 time signature. And what does that mean? It means that each measure, you see the staff here? The vertical lines are called bars, okay? And in between the bars, we have a measure, okay? And in the measure, in 4/4 time, we have 4 beats, and each quarter note gets a beat, okay? So that's pretty basic, and we're going over some basic things here, just in case people don't know these things. Most people, I think, do because they've been exposed to music in school and so forth. Maybe they play an instrument, they've been taking guitar lessons. That's very good. Keep taking lessons, keep practicing. Okay, so what we have here is you can see the bars, the staff. In between the two bars, we have a measure. Okay, now in 4/4 time, we would have 4 quarter notes. Okay, in each measure if we were working with quarter notes. Okay, so it's very simple. Okay, and let's say I was to show you a piece of music that looked like this. What we would have here is we're in 4/4 time, right? And the first measure has a whole note. It's on the line G. The second measure has 4 quarter notes. They are also on the line G. Third measure has 2 half notes. They are on the line G as well. So how would you sing this? Okay, this is good for your ear training. There's going to be plenty more of this if you want to be a guitarist, play in a band. Maybe you want to do backup vocals. Maybe you want to do lead vocals. This is a way to learn the fundamentals of reading music. So we would read this as G, okay? We would say G, 2, 3, 4. That's the first measure. That's the whole note. Next measure is G, 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 2, 3, 4. Those are 4 quarter notes in the measure. Next measure are the half notes. So that would be G2, G4, G2, G4. Okay? Very easy. Very rudimentary. So, now that we know a little bit about the notes and how to recognize them, we're going to talk about diatonic intervals. All right, so let's say, for example, that I have an interval. And I'm going to start on the G line. So I have a G note, and I'm going to use half notes. Now I'm going to use the third. I could use seconds, sixths, and sevenths, but I want to use a third for purposes of demonstration right now. So what is the third of G? Well, very easy. We start on G. We say G, A, B. B is 3. B is the third. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to draw or write, I should say, the third of G right here. And these two guys are tied together. They are half notes. I could write the B next to it, in which case I would be in a melody mode. Melody's horizontal, chords, thirds, triads are vertical. Okay, so you can see that, right? You see that right here? Here is the interval G to B. That's a third. Here's the interval G to B. That's a third too. It's the same thing. However, on the second example, um, it's written as melody. Okay, and melody is horizontal. Okay, as opposed to harmony, which this would be, this guy right here, he's written horizontally. Okay, so very simple, very easy. Now, what kind of third are we dealing with? Well, that's very easy too. We're in G, we're in the key of G. We're saying G, A, B, the third, but it's B natural, not B sharp, B flat, B natural. B natural is in the key of the key you're dealing with. In this case, it's the key of G. That's what diatonic means. It means within the key, the major key. Okay. It's not an accidental. Accidentals in the key of C, which has no black keys, would be sharps and flats. All the black keys in the key of C on the piano keyboard are sharps or flats, depending on what you want to call them. Okay. So, that's very easy. So here we have G to B. Okay. That's a major third. Okay. Now, however, what if I wrote that as G to B flat? Okay, well, I do that by putting a little flat sign next to the note. That now becomes not a major third, but a G minor third. Okay. All right. Very good. So you see how that works? See how that works? G to B natural is a major third. G to B flat is a minor third. But there's more to diatonic intervals. Diatonic intervals can be major, minor, augmented, or diminished. How would we get a diminished third from G to B? Well, you'd have to write it as B double flat. Okay, now you're not going to see that a lot. Why is that? Because B, G to B double flat is the note A. Okay, and the note A, if you would say the interval between G and A, that's a major second, but it's not written that way. We're not talking about what you're hearing now. We're talking about what's written down and what you're reading. Okay. The way it's written is G to B double flat. And in that case, it's a diminished third. So let me write that down. G to B double flat is a diminished third. Now you're not going to see that a lot because the composer would simply write it as the note A, but he might write it as B double flat for reasons only he would really know. It could be a number of reasons. Maybe he's modulating to a key where B double flat is important. okay? Whatever flat key contains the note B double flat, for example. Could be. I don't know why he would do it, but you could say it. But you should know it's not a major second, it's a diminished third. Now we can go the other way and we can have an augmented third. And what would that be? That would be if we got rid of these flat signs and we said G to B sharp. Okay, you see this? See how that works? G to B sharp. Well, what is B sharp? It's the note C. What is the interval between G and C? Very easy. G, A, B, C. It's a fourth. It's a perfect fourth. But if it's written as B sharp in the key of G, remember we're in the key of G. Remember that little F sharp up there? That's telling you we're in the key of G. Okay, in the key of G, B sharp, the difference between G and B sharp is a augmented third. Okay, see how that works? It's very easy. Okay, now the good thing is you're probably never going to see this, but you might. All right, you might. Um, because anybody who is writing the music, they're going to write the note C, but you never know what you run into, right? Um, you could even have like a music course in school, and the professor wanted to go into advanced theories with nebulous keys, and so he gave a student a piece of music that contained B sharp. Well, B sharp's the note C. You'd think he would write the note C, but the teacher wanted to make a point, so he wrote it the way he did. So when you see that it's a third and it's sharp in the key, that is a augmented third. All right, so what do we have? We have diatonic intervals. They are second, third, sixth, and seventh. They also can be major, minor, augmented, and diminished. And that really is intervals in a nutshell. Um, uh, why are intervals important? Well, they are important. They're very important. Okay? They're important because if you want to be a musician, you're probably going to come to a point where you want to write music. Okay? You might be playing in a band. You want your band to get well known. Maybe you have a desire to make a record. Well, most bands write their own music, okay? Usually it's one person from the band who really writes the music. The Beach Boys had a lot of hits. Brian Wilson really wrote all their hits. Um, the Beatles, probably one of the most famous bands ever. Uh, those songs mostly were written by John Lennon. Some were written by Paul McCartney. Some they collaborated on. Just because the song says it was written by Lennon and McCartney doesn't mean it was. That's for legal purposes. So, they divide the credit and therefore the income, you know. But the songs were that say Lennon and McCartney on the Beatles albums were either written by John Lennon or Paul McCartney. Um, Lennon really wrote the music for the Beatles. John Lennon was probably the best songwriter of the 60s and 70s, along with Brian Wilson. After that, you've got a lot of people who kind of fall into second place, you know. We're going to do a lot of deconstructing Beatles songs and Beach Boys songs because they're good songs to figure out. Okay. So that brings me to the second point, and that is that you can use intervals to figure out music. Like, let's say, for example, I have a piece of music and it's Here Comes the Bride, right? We all know that song. Here comes the bride, here comes the bride. That first line, here comes the bride, here comes, that is a perfect fourth. When your ears are trained, you'll recognize that and you'll be able to write it out in the key you're in because you're going to know all the sharps and flats and all the keys because I'm going to tell you how to figure that out. But you really should know it by heart, okay? But anyway, um, once you can follow a piece of music, listen to it by ear, and either play it on an instrument or write it out. If you can write it out on a piece of staff paper, you're on your way uh, to being able to take uh, musical dictation, okay? And that is a skill that only very seasoned musicians who study music all day, every day, the professional musicians have. They can take musical dictation. That means that they can listen to a piece of music and you just write it out as it goes past. All right. Uh, Not easy. Takes a lot of practice, a lot of study, but you know, it's invaluable if you want to be a professional musician and make your living playing music, which is not easy. You know, most people have a job and then they play on the side. They play at night with their friends. Maybe they have a band. Maybe they play on the weekends. They play at bars and so forth. That's what most people do. Some people, however, actually make their living playing music, being a musician, giving lessons, other ways too. And that takes dedication. You know, you have to become very good on an instrument. Usually, those people play several instruments. You have to be able to write music, have to be able to read it on the fly. Okay. That means somebody puts a piece of music in front of you and you can read it, okay, on your instrument, or you can sing it. So, intervals, very important. And they're also important in another way, okay, because musical intervals tell you where you are going in a piece of music. This is most evident in the resolution of the uh, dominant 5/7 chord that resolves to the one chord or the tonic chord. Okay, those two things are the same. The tonic chord and the one chord, same thing. The dominant 5/7 chord, same thing as saying the 5/7 chord. Um, in the 5/7 chord, you have a what's called tritone. It is also called the devil tone. Okay, why is that? Because it's the most dissonant sound in music. All right. And what do we know? We know that when people hear dissonance, they want to have it resolve in their heads to consonants. They don't like dissonance, they like consonants. And the 5/7 chord in a piece of music has a natural uh, tritone, which is a natural diatonic diminished fifth or augmented fourth. Those two intervals are the same thing. Okay, a diminished fifth and augmented fourth. This is a naturally occurring diatonic interval in the 5/7 chord that pushes the music to the one chord. When the 5/7 resolves to the one chord, that's called a cadence. And what a cadence is it's a stop. It's like you're driving along, you're doing 50 miles an hour, you hit the brake, your car stops. That's what a cadence is. It's an abrupt stop to the flow of music. Okay. I'm going to explain all that to you in videos to come. So, I hope I gave you a little tip on intervals. Um, and uh, we're pretty much done with this part of the video. However, I do want to come back and I'm going to take a minute to tell you how how you can make a donation to my channel because I want to build my channel on Odyssey so that we have like a community of people who love music, who can talk about music, um, write music, listen to each other's songs, uh, offer advice, criticism, help, constructive help, and I think it's something that people who love music would be interested in participating in. So, for now, let me say goodbye, and I will be back with you shortly. Hello, everybody. This is the final segment of the video I'm making, episode 2. My channel on Odyssey is called Music Theory for the Guitar by Peter Lamby. That's me. I'm Peter Lamby. And I'd like to tell you what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to establish a community of musicians who have an interest in music, music theory, music appreciation. I'd like to gather people together for a number of reasons. Perhaps to write songs together, listen to each other's songs, uh, critique each other's ideas, and even for people to get to know each other. So, if, for example, you're thinking of starting a band. You know, a typical rock band today consists of probably two guitar players and a bass and a drum. If you have a fifth piece, you have a keyboard. A lot of Beatles songs use keyboards throughout. For example, the song Get Back really features keyboards, piano as the main instrument in the song. So uh, you put these people together who love music and can play music, and you can do some good things. Now, I'd like to tell you how you can uh, donate to my channel through Odyssey. Okay? I've written it down here. It's very easy. Uh, if you can see this, all you need to do is go to my channel. Okay? That's Music Theory for the Guitar by Peter Lamby. And click on support. Okay, click on the support button, which is in the top right. You're going to come up with a screen. Screen's going to have a bunch of numbers on it. Those represent dollar figures. You can go down to the custom box and put in, for example, I put in here $15, and then you click send, and that will uh, send your $15 donation to my channel. Now, before you do that, however, you have to go to a website called Stripe. Stripe.com is a website that handles money transactions. It's a payment processor. And very easy to set up an account. Okay. All you do is put in your information, name and address. I believe it might ask for your phone number. And if you want to use your bank account, you can go to the cash option. You'll have to enter your bank account number and routing number, or you can add a credit card. And you simply click on the card option and you put in your credit card number and the expiration date. You know, there's a 3-digit number on the back that verifies the whole thing. I'm not exactly sure what that is. But anyway, you need to put that in, I believe. And this will add your credit card to uh, Stripe. Stripe interfaces with Odyssey. So when you make a support donation on Odyssey, they shoot a message to Stripe, and Stripe sends the money to the content creator, which in this case would be me. Now, it's very simple, really. Now, I'd also like to give you some contact information. Okay, now you can use this to ask any questions at all about music theory. If you have a comment about the website I'm doing, the podcast, whatever you want to call it, if you have a comment or you know a way to make it better, I would greatly appreciate that. So I'm going to give you my website, my email address. Okay, it's pslamby at gmail.com. Okay, now there's one thing. In the subject line, please put the word music. Even if you put like music theory or question on music, put the word music somehow in the subject line of your email, because I get hundreds of emails every day. They're all junk. I have about 20,000 emails on my Gmail account, and obviously I can't read them all, and I don't want to read them all because they're mostly advertisements from companies that I have no interest in. When I go use my Gmail, I search on a word. Like I'll use my employer's name, then I get just the emails from my employer, and I'll search on the word music, and I'll come up with your emails if you use the word music in the subject line. You see that? So here we have pslamby@gmail.com, and in the subject line, put the word music. And if you email me, I will write you back. It may take me a day or two, but I will definitely write you back. And if you how it defines a key. This is very important. Very few musicians know this, that the key is defined by the 5/7 chord. Okay. We're going to go through all that. So I want to thank you